I watched her slip that shiny ring on her finger, smile for the flashing cameras, and lean into the man beside her like he was her world. Everyone cheered. They called it love. They called it perfect. But only I knew what happened when the lights went out. Only I knew that at night, when the champagne fizzled and the guests disappeared, she found her way into my arms. Her hands, her voice, her heartbeat, they belonged to me. And yet, I couldn't scream it out. I couldn't stop the show. They think she's promised to him. They think he owns her love. But he doesn't know the way she trembles when I whisper her name. He doesn't see the way she looks at me when no one's watching. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're selfish. Or maybe, this is the only real thing we've ever known. Every moment with her feels like it's slipping through my fingers. I'm scared that someday I'll have to let her go, that she'll choose the life they expect over the love she hides. And I can't bear to be her secret anymore. But for now, she's mine. Even if the world never knows. She sat across from him, her smile flawless, every movement rehearsed. The restaurant was packed with people clinking glasses, toasting love, and pretending life was simpler than it really was. I watched from the corner table, swirling the straw in my untouched drink. She hadn't seen me yet. Or maybe she had, and she was doing what we both had become so good at, pretending. The engagement had been announced only a week ago. A glamorous post on social media. A perfectly filtered photo of them standing on a beach, her hands stretched forward, the diamond catching sunlight. The comments were wild. Perfect couple. So happy for you. Finally. And somewhere deep in the flood of praise, I scrolled in silence, my chest tightening with every passing second. Later that night, when the noise had died down and everyone had gone to sleep, she showed up at my door. No words. Just her, wrapped in a hoodie too big for her frame, looking like someone who had been holding her breath all day. I opened the door, and she stepped in like she belonged there, like it was the only place she could breathe. She didn't explain why. She didn't need to. Her arms wrapped around me with a desperation that made my knees weak. I pressed my face into her neck, and we stood there in silence, just holding on. I wanted to ask her why she said yes to him. Why she was putting on this performance. But I didn't. I was afraid the answer would break me. Back at the restaurant, I saw how natural she made it all look. Her laughter, her gaze toward him, the way she rested her hand gently on his. Anyone would believe it. Everyone did. He stood to give a toast, talking about love and destiny and how he knew from the first moment. People clapped. I watched her face, studying it for any crack, any moment of truth. But she stayed steady, poised, the perfect fiancé. After the dinner, I slipped out without saying goodbye. I couldn't stay another minute pretending I was just a face in the crowd. I took the long way home, the air cold and sharp against my skin. I walked until my feet hurt, until my head cleared, until the memory of her in that man's arms faded just enough for me to breathe again. It was past midnight when I heard the knock. Soft, hesitant. I opened the door, and there she was again. Eyes tired, lips trembling. I couldn't sleep, she whispered. Neither could I. She didn't wait for me to speak. She just walked in, like the space between us had never widened. Like the ring on her finger wasn't still sparkling under the porch light. I closed the door behind her, quietly, gently, like if I made the wrong sound, she'd vanish. She stood in the middle of the room, arms crossed tightly around her body. Her shoulders were tense. She didn't meet my eyes at first, but I could see the fight in her face, between guilt and longing, between everything she was supposed to be and everything she couldn't let go of. I hate this, she said, finally. Her voice cracked at the end, barely a whisper, but it landed like thunder. I didn't ask her what she meant. I already knew. The ring, the dinners, the carefully crafted love story. Him. She walked over to the couch and sat down like her legs were about to give out. I followed her, sitting close but not too close. Not yet. I could feel the heat coming off her skin, the storm she was holding back. She leaned her head into her hands and stayed that way for a long moment. Then she looked up. I don't know who I'm supposed to be anymore, she said. I feel like I'm living two lives. One where I smile for pictures and lie through my teeth, and one where I come here, and feel like myself. My heart thudded in my chest, but I kept my face calm. I knew better than to say something too fast. To push her before she was ready. I reached over and took her hand. She let me. Her fingers were cold. "You don't have to be anyone else here," I said softly. She looked at me, and I saw the tears in her eyes, just barely held back. "Then why does it feel like I'm breaking you too?" I didn't have an answer for that. Maybe because it was true. She laid her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her. There was so much unspoken between us. So many nights like this, full of quiet desperation. We both knew we couldn't stay in this in-between space forever, but neither of us wanted to let go. She didn't go home that night. She stayed wrapped in the warmth of a life that wasn't allowed to exist in the daylight. We talked for hours, about nothing and everything. About the past, about the first time we kissed. About how it felt to fall in love with someone you couldn't claim. When she finally fell asleep beside me, I stayed awake, watching her breathe. I wanted to freeze that moment and live inside it forever. But the sun would rise soon. And with it, the world would expect her to go back to pretending. I hated the morning for what it always meant. Because every time she left, it felt more like goodbye. Morning crept in like a thief, peeling away the safety of the dark. I could feel it before I opened my eyes, the stiffness in her body, the slow pull away from my arms, the weight of everything she didn't say pressing against the silence. She sat on the edge of the bed, back to me, already tying her hair like she hadn't spent the night tangled in my sheets and breathless in my arms. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "I have a breakfast meeting with his family," she said, voice flat, like she was reading from a script. I didn't answer right away. I sat up slowly, every movement thick with the ache of losing her again, even if just for a few hours. Or days. Or longer. Who knew anymore? She stood and walked toward the door, adjusting her sweater like she needed armor. I watched her every step, hoping, begging, she'd turn around. Say something. Anything that made it feel less like she was slipping further away. "I'll text you," she mumbled. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. And then the door clicked shut, and the silence that followed was louder than her goodbye. The hours crawled by. I tried to work, to eat, to distract myself, but her absence clung to the air. I checked my phone too many times, rereading old messages, fingers hovering over the keyboard, unsure of what to say. What could I say? That I missed her already. That I hated seeing her play a role she never wanted. Late in the afternoon, her name finally popped up. "Can we talk?" My heart thudded hard. I typed back one word. "Always." She came over that evening, but something was different. Her energy felt tight, wound up like a spring. She paced the room instead of sinking into the couch like she usually did. "He kissed me today," she said suddenly, stopping mid-step. I looked up, not sure how to breathe in that moment. I didn't ask if she kissed him back. I didn't need to. I let him, she continued. I smiled. I played along. His mom took pictures. She called me her future daughter-in-law. She laughed then, but it was the kind of laugh people make when they're seconds from crying. I felt like I was watching it happen to someone else. Like I wasn't even in my own body. I stood slowly and walked over to her. She didn't move when I reached for her hand. "I don't want this to be my life," she whispered. "Then don't let it be." She shook her head. "It's not that simple. It's all tied up. Family, expectations, money. They picked him for me like they were picking a dress. And I said yes because I thought it was easier than saying no." I wrapped my arms around her, held her close as she finally let the tears fall. I didn't tell her what to do. I didn't demand promises she couldn't keep. I just held her, quietly, as the truth cracked through her perfect performance. Outside, the world kept turning. But inside my apartment, it felt like time had stopped just for us. That night, she didn't say she loved me. She didn't have to. I felt it in the way she clung to me like I was the only real thing left in her life. And even though part of me wanted to scream, to rip the ring off her finger and tell her to choose me right now, I didn't. Because I knew her heart was still learning how to fight. The next few days passed in strange silence. She didn't text like she usually did. No late night knocks. No stolen moments between her fake smiles. I waited, staring at my phone more times than I could count. Every time it lit up, my breath would catch, only for it to be someone else. She was slipping away, and I didn't know how to pull her back without tearing us both apart. Then on a Thursday night, she finally showed up. She looked exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally drained, like she'd been carrying the weight of too many lies for too long. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying, but her jaw was set with something harder than sadness. It was fear. He knows, she said before I could even ask. I stepped aside, letting her in, heart racing. What do you mean he knows? He saw something. I don't know what exactly. Maybe it was the way I looked at you at the dinner. Or maybe he went through my phone. I'm not sure. But he asked me if there's someone else. I closed the door slowly, trying to think through the panic building in my chest. What did you say? She looked up at me, face full of guilt. I lied. I told him no. I felt the sting of those words, even though I understood. She wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be. But he doesn't believe me, she continued. He's watching me now, every move I make. I feel like I'm living under a microscope. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away, pacing the room. I don't know how to do this anymore. I'm tired of lying to him. To everyone. But I'm scared. What happens if I break it off? What if everything falls apart? I sat down slowly, trying to choose my words carefully. You're already falling apart, Sarah. You just don't want to admit it. And so am I. Every time you walk out that door, I feel like I'm disappearing. She stopped pacing, her eyes locking on mine. There was so much pain there, but underneath it, something else. Something raw, something real. He told me he loved me today, she said softly. Said he couldn't wait to build a future with me. And all I could think about was how I was in your bed the night before. I stood, walking toward her. I didn't say anything. I just wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close, because I didn't know how else to hold us together. I don't want to lose you, she whispered into my shoulder. Then stop pretending you never had me. We stood there like that for a long time, just breathing, just holding on. And when she pulled back, her eyes were clearer, like she'd made some quiet decision she wasn't ready to say out loud yet. She didn't stay the night. She kissed me once, soft, lingering, like a promise, and left before the sunrise. And for the first time, I didn't beg her to stay. Because I knew she was finally choosing what kind of life she wanted to live. I just didn't know if I'd be part of it. The days stretched longer after that night, heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. I tried to distract myself, diving into work, staying out late, filling my hours with anything that didn't remind me of her. But she was everywhere, in the coffee shop where we used to meet, in the song that played when I turned on the radio, in the scent left behind on the hoodie she had once borrowed and never gave back. I told myself to let go, to be strong, but how do you erase someone who made you feel seen in a way no one else ever had? She didn't come by. No messages, no signs. It felt like she had made her decision and disappeared into the safety of the life picked out for her. Until one night, almost 2 weeks later, I heard a knock at the door. I didn't rush to open it. I stood there, staring at the handle, heart pounding, afraid of what I'd find on the other side, afraid it might not be her, and even more afraid it would be. When I opened it, she was standing there in the rain, soaked to the bone, eyes wide and red. I told him, she said, her voice shaking. Everything. I stepped aside without a word, letting her in. She dropped her bag to the floor and ran her hands through her dripping hair, pacing the room like she couldn't breathe. He didn't scream. He didn't get angry. He just looked at me, like I broke something in him. I closed the door, staying quiet, waiting for her to let it out. I told him I couldn't marry him. That I'm in love with someone else. That I've been lying to myself, to him, to everyone. She stopped and looked at me, her eyes searching mine for something, maybe judgment, maybe relief. I hated myself for hurting him. But I hated myself more every day I stayed. I walked over, took her hands in mine, felt the coldness in her skin. He asked if it was you, she continued. I said yes. My heart jumped. For the first time in weeks, I felt something light stir in my chest. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like sorrow, like too much damage had already been done. What did he say? He said he knew, that he's known for a while. And he told me he hopes I find the courage to live my truth. A long silence fell between us, heavy but not empty. I didn't come here for comfort, she said. I came here because I needed you to know, I choose you. Not in secret, not just at night, I choose you in the light. I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, emotions crashing against each other inside me. Relief, fear, love, but also anger. Why now? I asked. Why after everything? Why did it have to take this long? She stepped closer. Because I was scared. Because I was selfish. Because I didn't know how to be brave. But I'm here now. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I touched her face gently, brushing away the wet strands of hair. I didn't know if I could trust her yet. But I knew I still loved her. She leaned into my touch, eyes closing for a moment. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she whispered. I'm asking for a chance. A chance. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to begin again. We sat in silence for a long time after that, the kind of silence that isn't empty but full of the weight we'd carried, full of the hurt we hadn't yet healed, and full of the truth we could no longer deny. Her fingers were laced with mine, tighter than before, like she was afraid I might pull away now that she had finally reached out. She told me everything that night. Every thought she'd buried, every moment she had looked at me across a crowded room and wished it could be different. She talked about the pressure from her parents, the expectations, the traditions she never truly believed in but was too afraid to challenge. And she talked about me, how I had become the only real thing in a world built on appearances and performance. I listened, trying not to interrupt, even when it hurt. I had waited for this honesty for so long, and now that it was here, it felt like both a gift and a scar being reopened. I don't want to hide anymore, she said softly. I want to walk down the street with you and not care who sees. I want to introduce you to people as the person I love. Not a friend, not a secret. I believed her. I wanted to. But the truth was, my heart still wore the bruises from every time she had walked away. I needed more than promises. I needed time. She understood that, without me having to say it out loud. That night, she didn't try to stay. She kissed me on the cheek, slow and soft, and whispered, "When you're ready, I'll be here." And she left. The next day, I didn't text her. I didn't call. I needed space to breathe, to think, to let the pieces settle. I went for a walk through the park where we once sat on a bench for hours, hands hidden between us like we were ashamed of how we felt. I remembered the way she had looked at me that day, eyes full of everything she couldn't say out loud. Now, things were different. She had said it all. The words were out there, raw and heavy. And for the first time, I wasn't the one left in the shadows. Later that evening, I got a text from her. "I'm at the old bookstore. Thought of you. That place had always been ours. Tucked away on a quiet street, warm with the scent of paper and dust and stories we used to get lost in." I walked there slowly, unsure of what I was walking toward. She was waiting inside, curled up in the same corner we always claimed. She looked up when I entered, and her face lit up with something soft. Something hopeful. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't either," I admitted. I sat beside her. We didn't talk much. We just existed together, and somehow that was enough. No pressure, no performance. Just us, wrapped in the quiet of something real. As the sun dipped below the windows and shadows stretched long across the wooden floors, I reached for her hand. And for the first time, I didn't care who saw. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and in that moment, the world outside stopped mattering. Maybe it wasn't perfect. Maybe we were still healing. But for the first time, we were healing together. The morning air felt different now. Lighter somehow, like something heavy had finally lifted. For the first time in a long while, I didn't wake up to dread or silence. I woke up to a message from her. Breakfast. It wasn't much, just one word, but it meant everything. We met at a small cafe neither of us had ever been to before. Maybe it was her way of marking a fresh start, or maybe she just needed a place where we hadn't already lived 1,000 secret memories. Either way, it felt right. Quiet, cozy, unassuming. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a window table, hands wrapped around a mug. Her face lit up when she saw me, and for once, she didn't check over her shoulder or shift nervously in her seat. "Hi," she said. "Hi." We talked easily, like we always had. About work, about music, about the rain last night. Normal things. But underneath it all, there was a new thread of calm, like the ground beneath us had stopped shaking. She reached for my hand across the table. No hesitation this time, no hiding. "I told my parents," she said quietly. I blinked. "You did." She nodded, squeezing my fingers. "It didn't go perfectly, but it wasn't as bad as I thought. My mom cried. My dad went silent. But they didn't disown me. They said they needed time." I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. Not because everything was solved, but because she had finally stopped running. "I'm proud of you," I said. She looked down for a moment, then back up. "I didn't do it just for me. I did it because I couldn't keep showing up in your life with only half of mine." That hit me harder than I expected. All those nights I had wondered if I was enough, if she'd ever choose me completely. They didn't disappear, but they didn't sting as much now. Because she was choosing me. Slowly, bravely. Later, we walked together down the street. She didn't let go of my hand once. People passed by, some glanced, some didn't. But no one stopped us. No one mattered. At a small flower shop, she pulled me inside, picked up a single sunflower and handed it to me. "For the bright parts we forgot we had," she said with a soft laugh. We kept walking until the city softened behind us and the noise became background. She talked about wanting to move, maybe get a place of her own. A fresh start. One that wasn't tied to expectations or guilt. She asked if I'd help her look. I nodded, and for the first time, it didn't feel like we were building something in secret. It felt like we were building something real. That night, she came over, not as a visitor, not as someone sneaking through the cracks, but as someone who belonged there. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. When we curled up on the couch, her head resting on my chest, it felt like home. No lies, no hiding, just her and me, and the quiet rhythm of a love finally learning how to breathe. She moved in 2 weeks later. There was no big announcement, no dramatic goodbye to her old place. Just a slow migration, boxes stacked one by one in the corner of my apartment, drawers filled with her things, toothbrushes side by side in the bathroom. It was the little things that made it real. Her laugh in the kitchen. Her favorite sweater draped over my chair. Her voice humming in the morning while she brewed coffee. We didn't talk about the past much. Not because we were ignoring it, but because we didn't need to relive what we had already survived. The pain, the secrets, the hesitation, they were still there in the background, but quieter now. Faded, like scars that no longer hurt when touched. One night, as we lay in bed, the window open and the city lights flickering outside, she turned toward me and said something I didn't expect. "I still feel guilty sometimes." I looked at her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Why?" "For hurting him. For wasting time. For not being brave sooner." I thought about that for a moment before answering. "You did the best you could with what you knew then." "We both did." She nodded slowly, her eyes searching mine. "Do you ever wish it had happened differently?" "Sometimes," I admitted, "but then maybe we wouldn't be here now." We fell into silence again, comfortable and full. She rested her head on my chest, and I wrapped my arms around her like I never wanted to let go. The world outside kept turning. People still whispered, judged, speculated. But it didn't matter anymore. Not when she reached for my hand in public. Not when we laughed out loud on park benches. Or danced barefoot in the living room. Not when I woke up each morning to the softness of her breath and the warmth of her body next to mine. We weren't perfect. We still had our fears, our shadows. But we were finally walking through them together, not hiding from the light. And maybe that was enough. Because love, real love, doesn't always come easy. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it breaks you before it builds you back up. But when it's real, when it's chosen fully, fearlessly, openly, it becomes something worth fighting for. She was once my secret. Now, she's my truth. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. Love isn't always simple. It doesn't always follow the rules or arrive when we're ready. Sometimes, it hides behind fear, behind expectations, behind everything we think we're supposed to be. But when it's real, when it refuses to fade even in silence, it finds its way through. This was a story about hidden love, about the pain of pretending, and the courage it takes to choose truth over comfort. If you've ever felt unseen, or had to hide a piece of your heart from the world, know that your love is valid. Your story matters. If this story touched you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more stories like this, and share it with someone who needs to hear they're not alone. And tell me in the comments, have you ever loved someone in secret? Until next time, keep loving bravely.